I am Amanda Roberts, 34 years old, and a cardiac surgeon who spent 15 years training to save lives. My parents always praised my dedication to helping others. But nothing prepared me for that Tuesday when they walked into my office with a shocking demand. I needed to donate my kidney to my estranged twin sister Rachel, who had destroyed hers through years of drug abuse. Their words still echo in my mind: "You have 2 kidneys and the skills to handle the surgery. She'll die without this, and you're the perfect match." When I refused to risk my surgical career and life for someone who had never shown responsibility, they sued me for $2 million, claiming I had a moral obligation and that refusing constituted medical malpractice against family. The judge asked them one question that exposed everything. Where are you watching from today? Give this video a like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family pressure that threatened your own well-being. My childhood in suburban Chicago was privileged by most standards, but emotionally complicated. Our 6-bedroom Tudor house in Winnetka had perfectly manicured gardens and a family dynamic that was just as carefully maintained for appearances. My father, Dr. James Roberts, worked as chief administrator at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, while my mother, Patricia, had been a head nurse in the ICU before retiring to focus on family management. From the outside, we looked like the perfect medical family dynasty. The reality inside our home told a different story. From my earliest memories, it was clear that my twin sister Rachel received preferential treatment, despite us being born only 12 minutes apart. The age difference was negligible, but the treatment difference was stark. When Rachel struggled with math in elementary school, my parents hired the most expensive tutors in Chicago. When I struggled with reading comprehension the same year, my mother handed me extra library books and told me to work harder. This pattern repeated throughout our childhood. Rachel was enrolled in private art classes, music lessons, and dance studios. I was encouraged to find practical activities that would build character. Amanda needs to learn discipline and self-reliance, my father would say, seemingly blind to the fact that Rachel never had to learn these lessons. By middle school, the differences became more pronounced. Rachel developed what I now recognize as attention-seeking behaviors and a sense of entitlement that only worsened as we grew older. When Rachel's grades slipped in 7th grade, my parents arranged for her to attend a prestigious private school. When my grades were perfect that same year, they told me the public school was good enough and that I should be grateful for the resources we had. High school brought the first signs of Rachel's substance issues. I found her smoking marijuana in our shared bathroom when we were sophomores. When I hesitantly mentioned it to our parents, they dismissed it as teenage experimentation and told me not to be a tattletale. Meanwhile, I was working part-time at the hospital gift shop and volunteering in the pediatric ward, already drawn to medicine by my desire to help others and prove my worth through achievement. Rachel's experimentation escalated throughout high school. Alcohol at parties became prescription pills from our mother's medical samples, then harder substances she obtained through boyfriends who seemed attracted to our family's wealth and status. Each time she was caught, my parents found excuses. "She's going through a difficult phase," my mother would explain. "Some children need more support than others." College brought geographic separation but not emotional distance from the family dynamics. My parents paid for Rachel to attend Northwestern University, close to home where they could monitor her progress. I earned a full academic scholarship to Johns Hopkins, choosing Baltimore specifically to create distance from the suffocating family atmosphere. "How can you abandon your sister when she needs you most?" my mother asked during a particularly tense phone call during my freshman year. "Twins have a special bond, Amanda. You're supposed to look out for each other." But I was already looking out for myself in ways no one in my family seemed to understand. Pre-med coursework was brutal, requiring 70-hour study weeks and constant competition with brilliant classmates. I lived in the smallest dorm room available, worked in the campus medical center filing records, and built a life focused entirely on academic achievement. Meanwhile, Rachel changed her major 4 times at Northwestern, from pre-med to psychology to communications to art history, extending her undergraduate years to 6 while my parents continued funding her education and increasingly frequent medical leaves for various treatment programs. Medical school at Johns Hopkins pushed me to my absolute limits. The academic rigor was matched by emotional challenges as I watched classmates struggle with stress, relationships, and the constant pressure of life and death responsibility. During my surgery rotations, I discovered my calling in cardiac surgery, drawn to the precision, skill, and immediate life-saving impact of the specialty. Rachel, meanwhile, had graduated from Northwestern with a communications degree and moved back home, where she worked sporadically at jobs that never lasted more than a few months. Her substance use had escalated to prescription opioids, which she obtained through a network of doctors and emergency rooms, often using our family's medical connections to avoid suspicion. "Your sister is struggling with a medical condition," my mother would explain during my rare visits home. "Addiction is a disease, Amanda. As someone going into medicine, you should understand that." I did understand addiction as a disease, but I also understood that recovery required the patient's active participation, something Rachel seemed unwilling to provide. Each intervention and treatment program was followed by relapse and renewed enabling from my parents. Residency in cardiac surgery at Mass General in Boston provided both the ultimate professional challenge and blessed distance from family drama. 100-hour weeks left little time for family visits or phone calls. When I did speak with my parents, conversations invariably focused on Rachel's latest crisis and my perceived failure to be supportive enough. "She asks about you constantly," my mother would say. "It breaks her heart that you've become so distant from family." But the distance was deliberate and necessary. I was building something meaningful, surgical skills that could save lives, professional relationships based on competence rather than family obligation, and an identity separate from the family dynamic that had defined my childhood. During my 5th year of residency, I met David Chen, an emergency medicine physician whose calm demeanor and dry humor provided a perfect balance to the intensity of my surgical training. Our relationship developed slowly, built on shared understanding of medical demands and mutual respect for each other's professional dedication. "Your family sounds complicated," he said after meeting them briefly during one holiday visit. "But you're not responsible for fixing everyone else's problems." Those words became an anchor during the increasingly difficult conversations with my parents about Rachel's deteriorating condition. By age 30, she had been through 6 treatment programs, had multiple drug-related arrests, and was living back at home while my parents supported her financially and emotionally. "She's your twin sister," my father would emphasize during our monthly phone calls. "You share DNA, Amanda. That creates special responsibilities." After completing my residency and fellowship, I accepted a position as attending cardiac surgeon at Boston Medical Center, finally achieving the professional goal I had worked toward for 15 years. The salary was substantial, but so were my student loan payments, malpractice insurance costs, and the expenses of building a medical practice. I had just signed the lease on a small condo in Boston's Back Bay when the call came from my mother that would change everything. "We need to have a family meeting," she said, her voice unusually serious. "It's about Rachel's health. You need to come home this weekend." Something in her tone frightened me. Had Rachel overdosed? Was she in legal trouble that required family intervention? Despite my reservations about returning to the family dynamic, I arranged coverage for my surgeries and booked a flight to Chicago. The flight gave me time to consider what this emergency might entail. Perhaps Rachel had finally agreed to enter long-term treatment. Maybe my parents were ready to implement tough love boundaries. Or perhaps, I thought with a glimmer of hope, they had finally recognized that their enabling had made Rachel's situation worse and wanted my medical perspective on treatment options. As the plane descended into O'Hare Airport, I felt the familiar mixture of anxiety and obligation that always accompanied visits home. I rented a car and drove the familiar route to Winnetka, noting how little had changed in the affluent suburb despite my years away. My parents still lived in the same Tudor house on Elm Street, though the pristine gardens now showed signs of neglect. Rachel's car, a luxury SUV my parents had purchased for her the previous year, sat in the driveway alongside my father's Mercedes. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my overnight bag and walked to the front door, not yet knowing how this weekend would completely upend my carefully constructed professional life. When I entered my childhood home, the familiar scent of my mother's lavender potpourri mixed with an underlying mustiness that suggested the house wasn't being maintained as meticulously as in the past. My mother, Patricia, rushed forward to embrace me, her hug lasting longer than usual. "Amanda, you look so professional in that suit," she said, holding me at arm's length to examine my appearance. "But you're too thin. Are you eating properly in Boston?" My father, James, approached more formally, offering a handshake rather than a hug. "Good to see you made it safely. Traffic from a hair can be unpredictable." In the living room, Rachel was curled up on the sofa in pajamas and a robe despite it being late afternoon. Her appearance shocked me. She had lost significant weight since I last saw her 6 months ago, her skin had a grayish pallor, and her once beautiful hair hung limp and unwashed. Most alarming were the obvious signs of edema in her face and ankles. "Hey, twin," she said without looking up from her phone. "Love the doctor costume. Very official." The casual dismissal stung, but I was more concerned about her physical presentation. "Rachel, you don't look well. What's been going on?" My parents exchanged glances before my mother spoke. "That's why we asked you here. We need to discuss Rachel's medical situation." My father gestured for me to sit down. "As a cardiac surgeon, you'll understand the complexity of what we're dealing with." Rachel finally looked at me directly, her eyes holding a mixture of defiance and desperation I had never seen before. "My kidneys are failing, Amanda. Complete renal failure. I'm on dialysis 3 times a week." The medical implications hit me immediately. End-stage renal disease in a 34-year-old typically indicated years of damage, most likely from the chronic substance abuse I had witnessed. "How long has this been going on?" "The kidney function started declining about 2 years ago," my mother explained. "We've been managing it privately with specialists, but it's progressed to the point where dialysis is no longer sufficient. She needs a transplant," my father added, his tone becoming more clinical. "We've had her evaluated at Northwestern's Transplant Center. She's been approved as a candidate." I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that always accompanied family medical discussions. "What about the transplant list?" Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "The wait time is 3 to 5 years for someone my age. The doctors say I probably don't have that long. Which brings us to why we asked you here," my mother said, moving to sit beside Rachel in a gesture of protective solidarity. My father leaned forward, his expression serious. "We need to discuss living donation options." The words hung in the air as I processed their implication. Living kidney donation was a major surgical procedure with significant risks, particularly for someone like me whose career depended on steady hands and physical stamina. "There are other family members who could be tested," I said carefully. "Aunts, uncles, cousins. We've already explored those options," my mother replied quickly. "None of them are compatible matches." "But you are," Rachel said, her voice carrying a note I couldn't quite identify. "We had you tested." I stared at them in disbelief. "You had me tested? When? How?" My father reached for a folder on the side table. "Remember your physical during your residency interview process? We requested additional blood work through your mother's contacts at the hospital. The violation was staggering. They had used my medical records without consent to determine my compatibility as an organ donor. That's completely unethical and probably illegal. It's family helping family," my mother said firmly. "And the results show you're a perfect match. Same blood type, tissue compatibility, everything." Rachel leaned forward, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Amanda, I'm going to die without this. You're my identical twin. We share everything, DNA, blood type, all of it. You're literally the perfect donor." The emotional manipulation was transparent but effective. For a moment, I felt the crushing weight of responsibility that had defined our relationship since childhood. But then my medical training kicked in, reminding me of the real risks involved. "Living kidney donation is major surgery," I said, trying to keep my voice clinical. 6 weeks recovery minimum, permanent changes to kidney function, surgical risks including death. For a cardiac surgeon, even minor complications could end my career. "You have 2 kidneys," my father stated matter-of-factly. "People live completely normal lives with 1 kidney. As a surgeon, you understand the anatomy better than most people. As a surgeon, I also understand surgical risks better than most people," I countered. What about her substance use history? Transplant centers have strict requirements about sobriety. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Rachel looked away while my parents exchanged glances. She's been clean for 6 months, my mother said finally. 8 months, Rachel corrected quickly. I've been totally clean for 8 months. The contradiction was small but telling. In my experience with addiction medicine during residency, relapses were common and often concealed from family members who desperately wanted to believe in recovery. I need to see her medical records, I said. All of them. If I'm going to consider this, I need complete information about her kidney function, substance use history, and treatment compliance. We don't need to review every detail, my father said dismissively. The transplant team has already approved her as a candidate. That's the professional medical opinion that matters. But I persisted. I want to see the records. If you want me to make an informed decision about major surgery, I need complete medical information. Rachel stood up abruptly, her face flushing with anger. There it is. The judgment I knew was coming. You think I don't deserve to live because I made mistakes? I didn't say that, I replied carefully. I'm trying to understand the medical situation fully before making a decision that will affect both of us permanently. You're my twin sister, she said, her voice breaking. We shared a womb for 9 months. We're genetically identical. If anyone in the world should help me, it's you. The appeal to our twin bond was predictable but still emotionally powerful. Growing up, our identical appearance had been a source of fascination for others and complicated identity issues for both of us. Rachel had always used our twin status to her advantage, expecting special treatment and understanding based on our shared genetics. I need time to think about this, I said finally. This isn't a decision I can make in one conversation. My mother began to cry softly. Time is exactly what we don't have, Amanda. Rachel's kidney function is declining rapidly. Every week we delay increases the risk that she'll become too sick for surgery. The transplant center wants to schedule the surgery within the next month, my father added. They have an opening in their surgical schedule, but we need to confirm donor availability immediately. The pressure was overwhelming, but I held firm. I need to consult with my own physicians, review the medical literature on outcomes for surgical professionals, and honestly assess the risks to my career and future health. Your career? Rachel's voice rose to near shouting. I'm talking about my life, and you're worried about your precious career? My career isn't just about money or status, I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. My surgical skills save lives. If this surgery compromises my ability to operate, it affects every future patient I could have helped. So you're saying your hypothetical future patients matter more than your actual sister? My mother asked, her tone sharp with accusation. The conversation was spiraling into familiar patterns of guilt and manipulation. I stood up, feeling the need to create physical distance from the emotional intensity. I'm saying this is a complex decision with far-reaching consequences that I need to consider carefully. That's not selfish, it's responsible. Responsible? My father's voice carried the cold disapproval I remembered from childhood. Your sister is dying, Amanda. You have the power to save her life, and you're talking about being responsible to strangers. They're not strangers. They're patients who trust me to be at my best when I operate on their hearts. That's a responsibility I take seriously. Rachel collapsed back onto the sofa, her sobs now audible throughout the room. I can't believe my own twin sister won't save my life. The emotional weight of the scene was crushing, but I forced myself to maintain boundaries. I didn't say I wouldn't help. I said I need time to make an informed decision about major surgery. How much time? My mother asked through her tears. 2 weeks. I want to consult with specialists, review all the medical information, and discuss the implications with my own healthcare team. My father gathered some papers from the folder. The transplant center needs an answer by next Friday. After that, they'll have to remove Rachel from the active list and look for other options. The ultimatum was clear. I looked at my twin sister, curled up on the sofa where we had played as children, now facing a medical crisis that could end her life. Despite our complicated relationship and her years of poor decisions, she was still my sister. The guilt was overwhelming. But my medical training had also taught me that emotional decisions in healthcare often led to poor outcomes for everyone involved. I needed space to think clearly about this situation. "I'll give you an answer by Friday," I said finally. I spent that night in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the magnitude of what my family was asking. On the nightstand sat framed photos of Rachel and me as children, identical faces, identical smiles, wearing matching outfits. Our mother had chosen to emphasize our twin status. The next morning, I flew back to Boston with a head full of questions and a heart heavy with guilt. My first call was to David, who listened without judgment as I explained the situation. "That's an enormous decision," he said when I finished. "What does your gut tell you?" "My gut is confused," I admitted. "Part of me feels obligated because we're twins and I have the medical knowledge to understand the procedure. Part of me feels manipulated because this is exactly the kind of family pressure I moved across the country to escape." "What about the medical risks?" "Significant. Kidney donation is generally safe, but I'm a cardiac surgeon. Even a 2% complication rate could end my career if it affects my dexterity or stamina. And there are long-term risks to kidney function that could impact my health as I age." David was quiet for a moment. "Have you considered that there might be other options? Other ways to help that don't involve major surgery?" I hadn't, actually. The conversation with my family had been so focused on the transplant that I hadn't explored alternatives. That afternoon, I made appointments with a nephrologist, a transplant surgeon, and a medical ethicist at Boston Medical Center to discuss the situation from multiple perspectives. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the nephrologist, reviewed Rachel's records that my parents had finally sent. "This level of kidney damage is consistent with years of substance abuse combined with poor medical compliance," she explained. "The patient would need to demonstrate sustained sobriety and lifestyle changes to be a good transplant candidate." "What about the timeline they're giving me?" I asked. "Kidney disease progression can be variable. While dialysis isn't a long-term solution, patients can survive on dialysis for years with proper care. The urgency they're describing might be more emotional than medical." Dr. Michael Torres, the transplant surgeon, was even more direct. "Living donation from a healthcare provider is complicated. Your professional responsibilities to future patients must be weighed against family obligations. There's also the question of whether the recipient has addressed the behaviors that caused the kidney failure in the first place." But it was my conversation with Dr. Jennifer Liu, the medical ethicist, that provided the clearest framework for thinking about the decision. "Family members often feel obligated to donate organs because of guilt, love, or pressure," she explained. "But ethically, organ donation should be a free choice made without coercion. The fact that you're feeling pressured by ultimatums and emotional manipulation suggests this decision isn't being made freely." "But she'll die if I don't help," I said. "That's possible, though not certain. But you could also suffer significant consequences if you do donate. True informed consent requires considering both possibilities equally." These consultations gave me a framework for thinking clearly about the decision, but they didn't make it easier emotionally. Each night, I lay awake imagining Rachel on dialysis, picturing my parents' disappointment, and questioning whether I was being selfish or sensible. On Thursday, the day before my deadline, my mother called with an update that changed everything. "Rachel collapsed during dialysis yesterday," she said, her voice tight with anxiety. "She's in the ICU at Northwestern. The doctors say her condition is deteriorating faster than expected." The medical crisis added new urgency to an already emotional situation. "What do the doctors recommend?" "They want to move forward with the transplant as soon as possible. If you agree to donate, they can schedule the surgery for next week." I felt the familiar tightness in my chest. I need to see her medical records from this hospitalization before I can make a final decision. "Amanda, there isn't time for more delays. Your sister is fighting for her life." But my medical instincts told me that something wasn't adding up. Kidney disease patients could live for years on dialysis if properly managed. Sudden deterioration usually indicated other complications or non-compliance with treatment protocols. "I'm flying to Chicago tonight," I said. I want to speak with her medical team directly. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital, I identified myself as both family member and physician to gain access to Rachel's ICU room. What I found there shocked me. Rachel was conscious and alert, sitting up in bed and arguing with a nurse about her dietary restrictions. Her color was better than it had been the previous weekend, and while she was clearly ill, she didn't appear to be dying imminently. "Amanda," she said when she saw me. "Did you come to tell me you'll donate?" "I came to see how you're doing and speak with your medical team." Her expression changed immediately. "You're still thinking about it?" "I'm in the ICU, Amanda. What more do you need to make up your mind?" Before I could answer, Dr. Rebecca Kim, Rachel's nephrologist, entered the room. I introduced myself and asked for an update on Rachel's condition. The patient experienced some fluid retention and electrolyte imbalances during dialysis, Dr. Kim explained. "We admitted her for monitoring and adjustment of her treatment protocol. She's stable now. Is she dying imminently without a transplant?" I asked directly. Dr. Kim looked between Rachel and me carefully. End-stage renal disease is a serious condition, but with proper management, patients can survive on dialysis for extended periods. The transplant would certainly improve her quality of life and long-term prognosis, but there isn't an immediate life-threatening emergency. I felt a mixture of relief and anger. My parents had characterized Rachel's situation as immediately life-threatening to pressure my decision, when the medical reality was more nuanced. "What about her sobriety compliance?" I asked. Dr. Kim hesitated. "There have been some concerns about treatment compliance and lifestyle factors that we're addressing with the patient." Rachel's face flushed red. "You can't discuss my private medical information with her." "I can if you're asking me to donate an organ," I replied firmly. "Dr. Kim, has the patient had any positive drug screens or missed treatment appointments?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Dr. Kim finally spoke carefully. "There have been some compliance issues that the transplant team is working through with the patient." I felt the crushing weight of confirmation that my family had been misleading me about crucial aspects of Rachel's case. She had not maintained sobriety as claimed, and her medical crisis was not as immediately life-threatening as presented. In the hospital parking garage, I called my parents to confront them about the deception. "We didn't lie to you," my mother said defensively. "Rachel is very sick and needs a transplant. But you implied she was dying imminently and that she had been sober for months. Both of those things are false. She's trying to get clean," my father interjected on the speakerphone. "The addiction is part of her medical condition. As her sister and a doctor, you should understand that recovery is a process." I do understand that recovery is a process. But I also understand that organ transplantation requires sustained sobriety and lifestyle changes that she hasn't demonstrated. "So you're abandoning your sister because she's sick?" my mother asked, her voice breaking. "I'm making a medical decision based on accurate information instead of emotional manipulation." The next morning, I called my parents to deliver my final decision. "I cannot donate my kidney to Rachel at this time," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "The medical risks to my career and future health are too significant, and her continued substance use suggests she's not ready for transplant surgery." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought they had hung up. "So that's it," my father finally said, his voice cold with anger. "Your sister will die because you're too selfish to take a small risk." It's not a small risk, and this decision wasn't made selfishly. I consulted with multiple specialists and considered all the medical factors involved. "You consulted with strangers instead of trusting your family," my mother added. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." The familiar guilt tactic stung, but I held firm. "I would be happy to help Rachel in other ways. I can connect her with the best addiction treatment programs, help with medical expenses, or assist with finding alternative donor options." "Those aren't alternatives," Rachel's voice came through the speaker, sharp with anger. "You're the perfect match. You're my twin. You're supposed to save me. I'm not responsible for saving you from the consequences of your choices," I said, the words feeling both cruel and necessary. "Fine," my father said with finality. "If that's your decision, Then you leave us no choice but to pursue other options. The ominous tone sent a chill through me. What does that mean? You'll find out, he replied before hanging up. 2 weeks later, I was reviewing surgical charts in my office when my assistant knocked on my door with an unusual expression. Dr. Roberts, there's a process server here to see you. The certified papers he handed me made my knees weak. My parents were suing me for $2 million in damages, claiming that as a medical professional with specialized knowledge, I had a duty to provide life-saving treatment to my sister. The lawsuit alleged medical malpractice, breach of family duty, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The legal document used my medical training and oath against me, arguing that my refusal to donate constituted abandonment of a patient in need of emergency care. It was completely fabricated legally, but seeing it in official court language made me physically ill. I immediately called the best medical malpractice attorney in Boston, Sarah Chen, no relation to David, who reviewed the lawsuit with professional skepticism. This is frivolous from a legal standpoint, she assured me. You cannot be sued for refusing to donate your organs, even to family members. The Hippocratic Oath doesn't create legal obligations to provide your own body parts as treatment. Then why file it? I asked. Family lawsuits like this are usually about pressure and punishment rather than legal victory. They hope you'll settle to avoid the professional embarrassment and expense of fighting. She was right about the professional implications. Within days of the lawsuit being filed, rumors began circulating at Boston Medical Center. Some colleagues expressed support for my position, while others questioned whether a physician who wouldn't save her own sister could be trusted with patients' lives. Dr. Michael Harrison, my department chief, called me into his office to discuss the situation. Amanda, I want you to know that this hospital supports your right to make personal medical decisions, he began carefully. However, this publicity could affect patient confidence and our department's reputation. I need to know that you're handling this professionally. I've retained counsel and I'm confident the lawsuit will be dismissed, I replied. But I understand the hospital's concerns. Take whatever time you need for legal proceedings. The department will cover your critical surgeries, but try to resolve this quickly. The stress was affecting my surgical performance. During a routine bypass surgery, my hands shook slightly while suturing, something that had never happened in my career. My surgical partner, Dr. Lisa Park, noticed immediately. You okay, Amanda? You seem distracted. Just dealing with some family issues, I replied, focusing on the precise movements required for cardiac surgery. Want to talk after we close? That afternoon, over coffee in the hospital cafeteria, I found myself explaining the entire situation to Lisa, who listened with growing amazement. They're suing you for not donating your kidney, she asked incredulously. That's insane. It gets worse. They're using my medical training against me, claiming I have special obligations because of my oath and knowledge. You know that's not how medical ethics work, right? Physicians aren't required to sacrifice their own health for patients, even family members. Her validation helped, but it didn't ease the pressure I felt from my family and community. Extended family members began calling to express disappointment in my decision. My Aunt Susan left a voicemail that particularly stung. Amanda, I'm shocked by your selfishness. Rachel could die while you're worried about your career. That's not the niece I remember. What my extended family didn't understand was that I had made the decision based on medical evidence, not career ambition. Rachel's continued substance use made her a poor transplant candidate, and the risks to my surgical career were significant and real. As the legal process moved forward, discovery revealed troubling information about Rachel's medical compliance. Despite my family's claims about her sobriety, drug screens showed continued cocaine and opioid use throughout the period when they were pressuring me to donate. Your sister tested positive for cocaine 2 days before they asked you to donate, Sarah, my attorney, informed me during a strategy meeting. And there are multiple missed dialysis appointments documented in her medical records. This information confirmed my medical instincts about Rachel's readiness for transplant surgery. Continued substance use would likely lead to poor outcomes even with a successful transplant, making the surgery risky for both donor and recipient. More disturbing was evidence that my parents had been coaching Rachel to conceal her drug use from the transplant team. Emails between my parents and Rachel discussed strategies for passing drug tests and maintaining the appearance of sobriety. They knew she was still using drugs when they asked you to donate, Sarah explained. This shows they misrepresented crucial medical facts to pressure your decision. The discovery process also revealed my family's financial motivations. My parents had taken out significant loans against their home to pay for Rachel's medical care and legal expenses from previous drug arrests. They were facing financial ruin if Rachel didn't receive a successful transplant that would reduce ongoing dialysis costs. Your parents weren't just asking you to save Rachel's life, Sarah observed. They were asking you to save their financial future. As we prepared for trial, I struggled with the emotional complexity of fighting my own family in court. David provided steady support, but even he sometimes questioned whether there might have been a compromise solution. What if you had agreed to donate on the condition that Rachel complete a year of sobriety first? He asked during one of our many discussions about the case. That's exactly what I offered, I reminded him. They rejected any conditions or alternative timelines. It was immediate donation or nothing. The night before the trial, I reviewed my testimony while sitting in my condo overlooking Boston Harbor. The city lights reflected on the water as I thought about how my life had led to this moment, a successful cardiac surgeon being sued by her own family for refusing to risk her career and health for a sister who hadn't demonstrated readiness for the gift being demanded. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Remember, you're fighting for every surgeon's right to make personal medical decisions without family coercion. You're not just defending yourself. That perspective helped me sleep better than I had in weeks. Tomorrow I would defend not just my decision, but the principle that medical professionals shouldn't be emotionally manipulated into providing their own organs as treatment. The Cook County Courthouse in downtown Chicago was an imposing building where I had never imagined I would defend myself against my own family. Dressed in a conservative navy suit, I met Sarah in the lobby, trying to calm my nerves before what would likely be the most difficult day of my life. Remember what we practiced, Sarah said calmly. Answer only the questions asked, stick to the medical facts, and don't let them bait you into emotional responses. We entered the courtroom, a formal space with dark wood paneling and uncomfortable benches. David had flown in from Boston to support me, taking a seat in the public gallery. As we settled at the defendant's table, the door opened and my family entered. My father led the group, his posture rigid in his best suit. My mother followed, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. Rachel came last, supported by a walker and appearing deliberately frail for maximum visual impact on the court. They took seats behind the plaintiff's table without making eye contact with me. Judge Patricia Brennan entered, and the proceedings began. The plaintiff's attorney, Robert Morrison, presented their case with dramatic flair. Your Honor, this is a case about medical duty and family obligation, he began. Dr. Amanda Roberts took an oath to save lives and has the knowledge and ability to save her twin sister's life. Her refusal to donate a kidney represents a breach of medical ethics and abandonment of family responsibility. Morrison called my mother to testify first. On the stand, she portrayed me as a cold, career-obsessed daughter who had abandoned family values for professional success. Amanda was always focused on achievement over relationships, she said, dabbing at her eyes. When Rachel needed her most, Amanda chose her career over her sister's life. Did you raise your daughters to support each other? Morrison asked. Of course. They're twins, they're supposed to take care of each other. Amanda has always been the stronger one, the successful one. Rachel needed her help. Next came my father's testimony, focusing on my medical qualifications and his interpretation of medical ethics. As a hospital administrator, I understand physician obligations, he stated. Amanda has the knowledge and skills to perform this surgery with minimal risk. Her refusal goes against everything she was taught in medical school about helping people. In your opinion, does Dr. Roberts have a duty to save her sister's life? Morrison asked. Absolutely. She's a doctor, and she's Rachel's twin. If she won't help her own identical sister, what does that say about her commitment to saving lives? Rachel's testimony was the most emotional, with genuine tears as she described her medical condition and fear of death. "Amanda and I shared everything growing up," she said, her voice breaking. "We were identical twins, same DNA, same blood type, everything. I never thought she would let me die just to protect her precious career." "How did it feel when your twin sister refused to save your life?" Morrison asked. "Devastating. Like losing half of myself. She has 2 healthy kidneys and the medical knowledge to understand that the surgery is routine. But she cares more about her surgical schedule than my survival." Throughout their testimonies, I maintained my composure despite the emotional manipulation and misrepresentation of facts. Sarah's cross-examination revealed crucial inconsistencies in their narrative. To my mother, Sarah asked, "Mrs. Roberts, are you aware that Rachel tested positive for cocaine and opioids during the time period when you were pressuring Amanda to donate?" My mother shifted uncomfortably. "Rachel has been struggling with addiction, but she's been trying to get clean." "That wasn't my question. Were you aware of the positive drug tests when you demanded Amanda donate immediately?" "We knew she was having some setbacks," she admitted reluctantly. Sarah then produced medical records showing Rachel's pattern of missed dialysis appointments and non-compliance with treatment protocols. "Mrs. Roberts, are you aware that transplant candidates are typically required to demonstrate sustained sobriety and treatment compliance before receiving organs?" "Rachel needed help, not judgment," my mother replied defensively. During cross-examination of my father, Sarah focused on the medical ethics claims. "Mr. Roberts, you testified that Amanda has a medical duty to donate her kidney. Can you cite any medical ethics guidelines that require physicians to donate their own organs to patients?" "It's about moral obligation," he answered evasively. "But legal and ethical medical obligations, can you cite any official guidelines requiring organ donation from physicians?" "No," he finally admitted. Sarah's cross-examination of Rachel was particularly effective in revealing the substance abuse issues. "Miss Roberts, how many times have you been in treatment for substance abuse?" Rachel looked to her parents before answering. "Several times. Addiction is a disease." "How many times exactly?" "Maybe 6 or 7 programs over the years." "And how many times have you completed these programs successfully?" "I completed them, but recovery is an ongoing process." "Miss Roberts, did you use cocaine or prescription opioids during the 6 months before asking your sister to donate her kidney?" Rachel's pause was telling. "I may have had some relapses, but I was trying to get clean." "So that's a yes, you were actively using illegal drugs when demanding your sister undergo major surgery to save your life." "I was sick," Rachel said, her voice becoming defensive. "Addiction is a medical condition." Sarah then presented evidence of Rachel's deception to the transplant team, showing emails where my parents coached her on hiding drug use from medical providers. "Miss Roberts, are you aware that continued substance use typically disqualifies patients from organ transplantation?" "That's not fair," Rachel replied. "I couldn't help being sick. When it was my turn to testify, I focused on the medical facts and ethical considerations that guided my decision. I consulted with nephrologists, transplant surgeons, and medical ethicists before making my decision," I explained. "Living kidney donation carries significant risks, particularly for someone whose career depends on precise hand coordination and physical stamina. Could you have physically afforded to take those risks?" Morrison asked during cross-examination. "The question isn't whether I could afford the risks, but whether those risks were justified given the recipient's poor compliance with treatment and continued substance abuse." "But you're identical twins. Doesn't that create special obligations?" "Being twins means we share genetics, not that I'm obligated to sacrifice my health for poor decisions she continues to make. Medical ethics requires informed consent without coercion, which wasn't possible in this emotionally charged situation." Morrison pressed harder. "So you value your career more than your sister's life?" "I value making medical decisions based on evidence rather than emotional manipulation." Rachel's continued drug use made her a poor transplant candidate regardless of donor availability. Sarah then presented expert testimony from Dr. Michael Chen, a leading transplant surgeon from Harvard Medical School. "Living organ donation should never be coerced through family pressure or ultimatums," Dr. Chen explained. The donor must make a free choice based on complete medical information. In this case, the recipient's active substance abuse would contraindicate transplantation at most major centers. What about the plaintiff's claims regarding medical duty? Sarah asked. There is no medical or ethical obligation for physicians to donate their own organs to patients, family members, or otherwise. Such a requirement would be unprecedented and dangerous. Dr. Chen's testimony effectively demolished the medical ethics arguments at the center of my family's case. Sarah also called Dr. Jennifer Liu, the medical ethicist I had consulted, who testified about coercion in family organ donation decisions. Family members often feel guilty about refusing organ donation, even when the decision is medically sound, Dr. Liu explained. The pressure tactics described in this case, ultimatums, emotional manipulation, and misrepresentation of medical facts, constitute coercion that invalidates true informed consent. After both sides presented their cases, Judge Brennan asked the question that cut to the heart of the matter. Mr. and Mrs. Roberts, I need a clear answer to this question. Do you have any legal precedent or medical ethics guideline that requires a physician to donate her own organs to a patient, even a family member? My parents' attorney whispered with them briefly before Morrison stood. Your Honor, while there may not be explicit legal requirements, this case involves moral and familial duties that transcend typical medical relationships. But we're in a court of law, not a court of morality, Judge Brennan replied. Legal obligations must be based on actual laws and established precedents. Do you have any? No, Your Honor, but. Then this case has no legal merit, the judge interrupted. Judge Brennan took only a brief recess before returning with her decision. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, I find no legal basis for the plaintiff's claims. No physician, regardless of family relationships, can be legally compelled to donate their organs to any patient. The defendant's refusal to undergo major surgery, particularly given the recipient's documented substance abuse and poor treatment compliance, represents sound medical judgment rather than malpractice or abandonment. This case is dismissed. The formal language couldn't disguise the complete vindication I felt. As Judge Brennan left the courtroom, silence fell over my family's side of the room. My father sat motionless, his face red with embarrassment or anger. My mother buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Rachel stared at me with a mixture of disbelief and fury. As I gathered my materials with Sarah, I heard Rachel's voice rise behind me. Are you happy now? She called across the courtroom, causing other people to turn and stare. You humiliated your own family in public just to protect your precious career. I turned to face her, keeping my voice steady. This was never about humiliating anyone, Rachel. You and our parents created this situation by demanding something medically inappropriate and then suing me when I made a responsible decision. We're family, she shouted, tears streaming down her face. That's supposed to mean something. Family should mean support and love, not coercion and lawsuits, I replied. I would have helped you in ways that made medical sense for both of us. My parents approached slowly, my father supporting my mother who looked devastated by the public failure of their case. The judge made her ruling, my father said stiffly, but that doesn't change what's right. You chose your career over your sister's life. I chose medical responsibility over emotional manipulation, I corrected him. Rachel's continued drug use made donation inappropriate regardless of our relationship. My mother looked up, her face streaked with tears. What happens to our family now, Amanda? Are we nothing to you because of this? The question pierced my heart. Despite everything, I still loved them and wanted a relationship that wasn't built on impossible demands and guilt. That depends on whether you can accept my boundaries and decisions going forward, I answered honestly. I want a healthy relationship with all of you, but not one based on coercion and unrealistic expectations. My father put his arm around my mother. Come on, Patricia. She's made her position clear. They walked away without another word, Rachel hobbling behind them with her walker, shooting me one final look of betrayal. Outside the courthouse, David waited with a supportive hug. How do you feel? Relieved but hollow, I admitted. I won the case, but I may have lost my family permanently. You stood up for medical ethics and your own well-being, he reminded me. That took incredible courage. As we walked to our car, Sarah provided practical guidance about the aftermath. The dismissal will be public record, which should help with any professional reputation concerns, she explained. I'll send a summary to your hospital administration showing that the court found no merit in the malpractice claims. Back at my hotel room, I was emotionally exhausted but couldn't ignore the flood of text messages and voicemails that had accumulated during the trial. Some were supportive, colleagues expressing relief at the outcome and admiration for my stance. Others were critical, particularly from extended family members who felt I had publicly embarrassed the family. Aunt Susan's voicemail was particularly harsh. "I can't believe you put your parents through that public humiliation. Rachel needed you, and you chose yourself instead. Don't expect family support when you need it someday." But there were also unexpected sources of support. Dr. Harrison, my department chief, left a message congratulating me on the victory and expressing the hospital's full support. Several medical colleagues texted appreciation for defending physician autonomy in family medical decisions. Most surprisingly, I received a call from Dr. Rebecca Kim, Rachel's nephrologist at Northwestern. "Dr. Roberts, I wanted you to know that I think you made the right decision," she said carefully. "Between you and me, Rachel wasn't ready for transplant surgery. Her continued substance use and poor compliance made her a high-risk recipient regardless of donor availability. Will she be okay on dialysis?" I asked, still concerned about my sister despite everything. "If she follows the treatment protocol and addresses her substance abuse issues, she can live for years on dialysis. There are also other donor options if she demonstrates sustained sobriety and lifestyle changes." This professional validation from Rachel's own doctor provided some comfort, confirming that my decision had been medically sound even if emotionally difficult. The flight back to Boston gave me time to process the day's events. I had successfully defended my right to make personal medical decisions without family coercion, but the cost had been enormous. My relationship with my immediate family might be permanently damaged, and the public nature of the lawsuit had exposed private medical information and family dysfunction. Yet I also felt a profound sense of relief. For the first time in my adult life, I had set clear boundaries with my family and maintained them despite intense pressure. The lawsuit had forced into the open the dysfunctional patterns that had shaped our relationships for decades. Returning to work at Boston Medical Center, I found strong support from colleagues who had followed the case. Dr. Lisa Park was particularly encouraging. "You did something important," she told me over coffee in the doctor's lounge. "Family members pressure healthcare workers all the time to make inappropriate medical decisions. You showed that we don't have to sacrifice our professional judgment or personal well-being just because someone is family." My surgical skills, which had suffered during the stressful lawsuit period, gradually returned to their previous level. The tremor in my hands disappeared as the emotional pressure lifted. Within a month, I was performing complex cardiac procedures with my usual precision and confidence. 6 weeks after the trial, I received an unexpected email from Rachel. It was the first direct communication from any immediate family member since the courthouse confrontation. "Amanda," it began, "I'm in a treatment program in Colorado. 90 days inpatient, then supervised sober living. Mom and Dad made it a condition for continued financial support. I wanted you to know that I'm finally taking this seriously. I also wanted to say that I understand now why you couldn't donate when you did. I wasn't ready, and I wasn't honest about my drug use. I'm sorry for putting you through the lawsuit. I hope someday we can have a relationship again, but I know I have to prove I'm serious about recovery first. Rachel." The email brought tears to my eyes. It was the first time Rachel had ever taken responsibility for her actions or acknowledged the impact of her behavior on others. While I remained cautiously hopeful about her recovery, the message represented a significant shift in her attitude. 3 months later, my mother sent a brief text, "Your father and I are seeing a counselor to work through what happened. We're not ready to talk yet, but we wanted you to know we're trying to understand our part in this situation." It wasn't an apology or full reconciliation, but it suggested some willingness to examine the family patterns that had led to the lawsuit. I replied simply, "I'm glad you're getting support. I love you both and hope we can rebuild our relationship in time. As autumn arrived in Boston, I settled into a new normal. The acute pain of family estrangement had evolved into something more manageable, a sadness that surfaced on holidays and birthdays but didn't dominate my daily life. My relationship with David had deepened through the crisis. His unwavering support during the lawsuit had shown me what healthy love looked like: respect for my autonomy, support for my difficult decisions, and care for my well-being without attempts to control or manipulate my choices. "I'm proud of how you handled all of this," he told me one evening as we walked along the Charles River. "It couldn't have been easy to stand up to that kind of family pressure." "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," I admitted. "But it was also necessary. I can't save other people's lives if I don't protect my own well-being first." That perspective had become central to my approach to both medicine and relationships. The lawsuit had taught me that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was essential for maintaining the health and skills needed to help others effectively. My surgical practice continued to flourish as I channeled the energy previously consumed by family drama into professional excellence. I was invited to present my research at national conferences and was being considered for a leadership role in the cardiac surgery department. 1 year after the trial, I received a card from Rachel with a Colorado postmark. Inside was a photo of her looking healthy and clear-eyed, standing with a group of people at what appeared to be a recovery program graduation ceremony. 6 months clean, the note read. Still on dialysis but following all my treatment protocols. Learning to take responsibility for my own health instead of expecting others to fix my problems. Thank you for not enabling me when I needed to learn that lesson. Love, Rachel. The transformation was remarkable and gave me hope that our family might eventually heal from the trauma of the lawsuit. But I also recognized that true reconciliation would take time and continued changed behavior from everyone involved. As I reflected on the year since that terrible family dinner, I realized that the lawsuit, despite its pain and cost, had ultimately been liberating. It had forced me to articulate and defend my values, establish clear boundaries, and build a life based on my own choices rather than family expectations. The experience had also deepened my empathy for patients facing family pressure around medical decisions. I now made sure to screen for coercion when discussing treatment options with patients whose families seemed overly involved in their care. Most importantly, I had learned that saying no to unreasonable demands, even from family members, wasn't selfish but necessary for well-being. Healthy relationships, whether family or chosen, were built on mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. Today, I still hope for eventual reconciliation with my family, but I no longer need their approval to feel complete. I have built a life guided by medical ethics, personal values, and healthy relationships that add meaning rather than drain energy. The lawsuit had tried to force me to sacrifice my health and career for someone else's poor decisions. By refusing that demand and defending my position in court, I had protected not just my own well-being but also established an important precedent about physician autonomy and family coercion in medical decisions. If you have ever faced impossible medical or financial demands from family members, know that protecting your own well-being isn't selfish, it's necessary. You cannot save others if you don't first preserve your own ability to help. Setting boundaries with family members who make unreasonable demands is an act of self-respect that ultimately benefits everyone involved. Have you ever had to choose between family pressure and your professional or personal well-being? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing firm on reasonable boundaries is an act of strength, not selfishness. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it gives you courage to navigate your own family complexities with both compassion and clear boundaries.